All right, good morning, everyone. The Lord be with you. Let's pray. Most merciful God, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather together in this space. We pray that you will open our hearts and our minds so that we may hear and experience what you would have us to hear and experience. I ask you all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So for today, we have three presenters, as you can see. My name is Jon Statton. I think you all know all of us. This is Reverend Maryann Philbrook-Sturges and Kyle Mahaney. Today we are going to be talking about the Episcopal Church's public policy on about four different issues, very important issues. This is, I just want to make sure, starting off, the Episcopal Church and the Episcopal Cathedral of the Nativity doesn't endorse any political candidates. So we're not going to be doing that today. We will be talking about, though, candidates' position on particular issues and comparing those with official policy statements of the Episcopal Church. So this is not endorsing any one candidate. And we don't endorse candidates really for two reasons. One is we'll get in trouble with the IRS. And if we were to endorse candidates, we could lose our tax exempt status. But there's a bigger theological reason why we don't do that kind of thing. It's because the church should always have a prophetic role in the political system. So we should always be keeping candidates accountable, no matter who they are, to centering those who are most vulnerable and protecting those who are most vulnerable, and living into the values that we think are important. So we are always in a prophetic role, and if we were to endorse anyone, we would be in a partnership role, and that would actually hurt our prophetic role. So we don't do it for that reason. The church is, though, political in that we care about how we shape our communities. So one person once told me the definition of politics is really simply who gets what, when, where, and how. So it's decisions about who gets what, when, where, and how. And Jesus was incredibly concerned about who got what, when, where, and how, right? So Jesus provided healthcare to folks free of charge. Jesus started a free lunch program in the desert, fed 5,000 people, right? So Jesus cared about who got what, how they got it, when they got it, where they got it, how they got it. So we'll be talking about that this morning with four different policy issues. Some of them are hot button issues, I guess. Maybe some of them aren't.
They are all ones the church has a clear stance on.
Right, but they're all ones that the church has a clear stance on. So I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who's going to lead us through each of the policies, and then we'll have about 2 or 3 minutes of discussion after Kyle presents each of the policies. So, Kyle, all yours.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about four issues: reproductive rights, immigration policy, gender identity, and housing accessibility. Now, looking at these candidates, I tried to compile statements that fairly represented the consistent positions of the candidates. Now, this is a little bit challenging for a couple of reasons. We have both of these candidates like to express themselves in a very conversational tone. Former President Trump more than the other in the fact that his official policy document is written in first person. So it makes finding a concise statement difficult. And Vice President Harris's official policy document doesn't actually exist. It was written for President Biden, and then her name was put on it after the draft. So it's a little tricky to formulate both actual position documents for these candidates. So what we're doing is we're looking at the official position document, and then we're going to look at statements from interviews or press conferences that is a consistent, recurring ethic in how they're presenting the issue. And then, of course, comparing to official positions of the church, be that general convention measures, statements of the presiding bishop, or statements from the Episcopal Public Policy Office. If you don't know the Episcopal Public Policy Office, they are a fantastic resource. I recommend you check out their website in the coming days. So first, on reproductive rights, we're going to alternate which candidate's perspective goes first, and Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris and Government Walz trust women to make decisions about their own bodies and do not have the government tell them what to do. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, Vice President Harris has driven the administration's strategy to defend reproductive freedom and safeguard the privacy of patients and providers. As president, she will never allow a national abortion ban to become law. And when Congress passes the bill to restore reproductive freedom nationwide, she will sign it. Former President Trump. Republicans will protect and defend a vote of the people from within the states on the issue of the life. We proudly stand for families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life, liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. After 51 years, this is a different statement. After 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. We will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and to IVF, which is fertility treatments. Now, those are the official policy documents their campaigns have put forward at their conventions. Let's look at what they say in interviews or press conferences. Harris said, "For anyone watching from another state," these are comments made in Texas, "if you think you are protected from Trump's abortion bans because you live in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Nevada or New York or California or any state where voters or legislators have protected reproductive freedoms, please know, no one is protected." She warns, because a Donald Trump national ban would outlaw abortion in every single state, all that is to say, elections matter. That was on October 24th. Give you some clue as to when I made this PowerPoint. Regarding religious exemptions, she said a couple days ago to NBC News, "So that's my point about what is non-negotiable. It has to be that we agree that it is so fundamental that we will allow women the ability with their doctor, if they make the choice, their faith leader, to be able to make these decisions and not have the government tell her what to do." Switching to former President Trump, in a Truth Social post, which is a social media network controlled by former President Trump, he said, "After 50 years of failure, with nobody coming even close, I was able to kill Roe versus Wade. Without me, there would be no 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 15 weeks, or whatever is finally agreed to. Without me, the pro-life movement would have just kept losing. So thank you, President Trump." Again, it's a statement by President Trump in the first person. At a town hall interview with Chris Matthews for NBC 2 months ago, he was asked, "Do you believe in abortion or no as a principle?" Candidate Trump said, "The answer is there has to be some form of punishment." Matthews then asked, "For the women?" And Trump said, "Yes." Matthews asked, 10 days or 10 years, referring to the appropriate criminal punishment. Trump said, "I don't know, and it's complicated. It will have to be determined." Now let's look at the official position of the Episcopal Church, which since the 1970s has had clear teaching on the matter of abortion. We declare that, from the General Convention, that we emphatically oppose abortion as a means of birth control, family planning, sex selection, or any reason of mere convenience. At the same time, since 1967, the Episcopal Church has maintained its unequivocal opposition to any legislation on the part of the national or state governments which would abridge or deny the rights of an individual to reach informed decisions about the termination of pregnancy and to act upon them. Then, at the General Convention in 2018, they called for women's reproductive health and reproductive health procedures to be treated as all other medical procedures. They declared that equitable access to women's health care, including women's reproductive health care, is an integral part of a woman's struggle to assert her dignity and worth as a human being. We will continue to advocate that legislating abortions will not address the root of the problem. We therefore express our deep conviction that any proposed legislation on the part of national or state governments regarding abortions must take special care to see that the individual conscience is respected, and that the responsibility of individuals to reach informed decisions in this matter is acknowledged and honored as the position of the Church. The Episcopal Church recognizes the challenges of infertility, and since 1982, we have supported in vitro fertilization. The Church acknowledges that surrogacy is a complex issue with potential for exploitation of surrogates. The Church calls for moral discernment for all involved. May I turn it over to Reverend Maryann to run some questions.
So that was a lot of information very quickly. So I just want to kind of get a feel for the room. Was there anything that surprised you in what you saw and heard about about reproductive rights?
I was surprised about the Episcopal position of we oppose abortion as a means of da 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 da. That's fairly black and white, and I've never thought about it from the Episcopal Church. So it's interesting to read, but what's the date?
So
of a statement like that.
There was like 20 statements with very similar language, starting in '67 and being consistently reaffirmed. This is kind of a summary they put out in 2022 after Roe was overturned.
So these statements, the way we get official statements, General Convention, which is our 3 years, the Episcopal Church meets and we take a vote of elected leaders on what our official positions are. And since 1967, our official position has been reaffirmed at different conventions that we do oppose abortion as a means of birth control, but we also oppose any efforts to restrict abortion. And so there's this kind of moral fine line that I think the Episcopal Church is trying to take a stance on, right? Like, and the way I've heard it phrased is that we are prayerfully pro-choice. That we believe that making that decision for any woman or any family, any doctor, it can be a decision that is very challenging for her and her family. And yet we believe there should not be restrictions because it should be her decision. Anything else that kind of surprised you about the candidates or about the Episcopal Church's stances on these things? Anything that stood out to you?
Well, I just want to point out that the one statement from Donald Trump to whoever was in Chris
Matthews.
predates his presidency.
No, that interview is in this last cycle. Yeah, almost positive.
Wait. What?
2021.
2021. So it's
It's this cycle. He filed to run for president the day after the election in 2020. It's this cycle.
So it was 2021. So it's not. It was pre-Roe versus Wade being overturned,
Wait.
but still in this.
Well, if he wasn't even president.
No.
No, but he had been president.
I guess so. Trying to recross.
Anybody else want to make any comments on reproductive justice before we move on to immigration? Because it's gonna get juicy.
Are there statements that have given a rationale for why we emphatically oppose abortion as a means of birth control? I'm not sure what that means. That can mean a lot.
You could actually look up minutes of the floor discussions regarding all of these measures for the General Convention. In general, it's an attempt to avoid someone being pressured to unfairly terminate pregnancy.
I would also say these are quotes from specific resolutions or from the Public Policy Network, and there is more information on what our stances are. This is just kind of a quick summary of it. The Episcopal Public Policy Network, their website, you can go onto their website and search for any topic, and they will give you either official statements from the Episcopal Public Policy Network, or they'll give you a list of convention resolutions that speak to these topics. So if you do want to kind of dive into a little bit more, what are our full statements? I would suggest you go there.
Does this come up at every convention, or is it,
It seems like about every one or every other one.
does it?
Yeah, and in 2022, well, this past year, 2024, we had another convention, and I think we reaffirmed our commitments.
I think we thought
At that
it was the
convention.
same language. It was the exact same document.
Yeah.
So, I mean, am I reading into that there's a pretty unified
Yep.
position on it versus it comes up as controversial?
It's not.
It's not controversial. It's often like, in the way convention works, it's often just kind of the ones that are, yeah, we just approve it. It's not even always discussed on the floor.
If I could just add to that, it is just, it's, as you said, just reaffirming so that we as the Episcopal Church can say, we look at this every 3 years and make sure our position hasn't changed, that we haven't changed our thinking, that we're reaffirming that.
Right, Jim?
Sorry, but I presume the Catholic Church has a explicit statement against birth control. Does the Episcopal Church have an explicit statement regarding any form of birth control?
I'm not sure. Maybe Kyle knows a little more.
Yes, actually, we do support the access to birth control.
The access to birth
Yes.
control.
Yes. And the Catholic Church has a stance on anything that impedes the sperm from reaching an egg. That is their actual technical position.
And I think it's also important the IVF part of this, although because there has with Roe versus Wade being overturned, there are also threats to in vitro fertilization and fertility treatment.
So, I know this is just a summary, and that statement is pretty black and white, like you said, but what about, does the church have an official stance on things like in cases of rape, or?
This is our statement. There is nothing that should abridge a woman's right to choose.
Right. I mean, we are our statement is we oppose abortion as a means of birth control or for sex selection or any reason of convenience, which is a little gray, like what is a reason of convenience? But at the same time, we oppose any restrictions on access. So we believe that a woman should be able to access full reproductive health care at any time, which would mean you wouldn't need an exclusion for rape or incest or other, because she would have the access to it for whatever reason that she needs it. All right, we're gonna move on.
Our next position is policy regarding immigration and the southern border of the United States. In the interest of time, I'm going to probably do reduced statements. There are more available here because they kind of say the same thing consistently. Republicans will restore every border policy of the Trump administration and will halt all releases of illegal aliens into the interior. We will complete the border wall, shift massive portions of federal law enforcement to immigration enforcement, and use advanced technology to monitor and secure the border. We will use all resources necessary to stop the invasion, including thousands of troops currently stationed overseas, to our own southern border. We will deploy the U.S. Navy to impose a full fentanyl blockade on all waters of our region, bordering and inspecting ships to look for fentanyl and all fentanyl precursors. Before we defend the border of foreign countries, we must first secure the border of our country. President Trump and the Republicans will reverse the Democrats' destructive open borders policies that have allowed criminal gangs and illegal aliens from around the world to roam the United States without consequences. The Republican Party is committed to sending illegal aliens back home and removing those who have violated our laws. Republicans will use existing federal laws to keep foreign Christian-hating communists, Marxists, and socialists out of America. Those who join our country must love our country We will use extreme vetting to ensure that jihadists and jihadist sympathizers are not admitted. This is his official policy document. Vice President Harris, in her official policy document, said, as Attorney General of California, Harris went after international drug gangs, human traffickers, and cartels that smuggle guns, drugs, and human beings across the U.S.-Mexico border. As Vice President, she supported the bipartisan border security bill that is the strongest reform in decades. The legislation would have deployed more detection technology to intercept fentanyl and other drugs, and added 1,500 border security agents to protect our border. After Donald Trump killed the border deal for his own political gain, she and President Biden took action on their own, and now border crossings are at the lowest level in 4 years. Their administration is seizing record amounts of fentanyl and secured funding for the most significant increase in border agents in 10 years. As president, she will bring back the bipartisan border security bill and sign it into law. At the same time, she knows that our immigration system is broken and needs comprehensive reform that includes strong border security and an earned path to citizenship. There are a number of comments on immigration. Some of these are quite offensive. They dump them on the border, this is President Trump speaking, and pour into our country, and nobody said to check them. They're destroying the blood of our country. That's what they're doing. They're destroying our country. They let, I think the real number is 15 to 16 million people into our country. When they do that, we get a lot of work too. They're poisoning the blood of our country. Illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation. They're coming from prisons, from mental institutions, from all over the world. These were comments at a campaign event in Waterloo, Iowa in July.
Be right out of Mein Kampf. Well, that could be right out of Mein Kampf. I mean, so
that's
ugly.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris has imported an army of illegal alien gang members and migrant criminals from the dungeons of the third world, from prisons and jails and insane asylums and mental institutions, and she has had them resettled beautifully into your community to prey upon innocent American citizens. Comments at a campaign event in Aurora, Colorado. How about allowing people to come to an open border, 13,000 which were murderers, many of them murdered far more than one person, and they're now happily living in the United States. You know, now a murderer. I believe this. It's in their genes. And we got a lot of bad genes, we've got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. It's an interview with conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt last month. It's comments from Harris. This issue cannot be reduced to a political issue. We're talking about children, we're talking about families, we're talking about suffering. These are comments she made when visiting the border in 2021. But also, in 2021 in Guatemala, she made comments directed at Guatemalan immigrants saying, do not come, do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our borders. If you come to our border, you will be turned back. And going back a little farther, in 2018, she gave an interview with NPR, where she said, I disagree with any policy that would turn America's back on people who are fleeing harm. I frankly believe that it is contrary to everything we have symbolically and actually said we stand for. And so, I will not enforce a law that would reject people and turn them away without giving them a fair and due process to determine if we should give them asylum and refuge. Now let's look at the official position of the Episcopal Church. The Church urges all governments to keep their commitments and legal obligations to respect the rights and dignity of all people, including access to justice and social services, while recognizing the complexity of developing just immigration policies in any country, and the legitimate need to protect borders and address security threats to sovereign nations. The Church supports U.S. executive policies that de-emphasize immigrant migration action against those who have not committed felony crimes, and it deplores the unprecedented levels of detention and deportation carried out by the U.S. government against individuals who pose no threat to our society.
So immigration. This is a topic that is very dear to me. As in this church, we have a lot of members who are immigrants who have come from other countries and are members of this community, and so it's an important topic for us to think about what our church's official stance is, and then also what both candidates have said. So once again, did anything surprise you about the Episcopal Church's stance or either candidate's stance?
I'm just wondering what, the very last statement seems to be quite directive.
That was passed after the child detention controversy of 2018.
2010?
2018.
And yeah, so in 2018, when Trump implemented the policy of separating children from their families at the border, we had a general convention that summer, and so this was some of the response to some of that.
Does the Episcopal Church have any presence at the border?
Yes, we do have. We have quite a bit of presence at the border. There are Episcopal houses that support immigrants on both sides of the border in Mexico and in the U.S. And then there's also the diocese down there have strong border missions. Yes.
I was part of the Diocese of Arizona years ago, and we went down all the time. It was dreadful. 20 years ago, they would send mothers with nursing babies back across with no help.
It is. Yeah. This is not something that just started. This has been an ongoing issue with immigration. I would like to say something about this. I think for me, I'm not that surprised, but Harris's position on immigration, although her language is not inflammatory, her positions are somewhat similar to Trump's. Increasing security, keeping the drugs out. So her position, she doesn't use the language that Trump uses that is disgusting and dehumanizing. But she did tell the immigrants, do not come. We are going to enforce our border security. So their positions are, I don't know that either one of these candidates stands totally in line with what the Episcopal Church thinks on immigration.
I would add, though, just that she makes a clear distinction between refugees and those crossing for non-refugee reasons, and that's something that President Trump has consistently blurred the lines of.
That's true.
Our next.
Oh wait.
But just a minor comment, because I think that when Biden was elected president, he had a much more open language. It seems that it backfired on him. So then I think a lot of this, I don't know if I'm rationalizing it, but it seems to me that it's reflecting political realities that they're facing.
Also, our border situation is informed by the stability and state of other nations. So it's not just our security, but what are the number of people fleeing other nations?
Right. So the insecurity and things happening in other countries affects people fleeing and trying to come here.
Gender identity, referring to the entire scope of gender identity, be that people who are transgender, people who are non-binary, or people who are agender. We've seen a lot of ads about this in the last 2 weeks with a huge media buzz by one candidate. Vice President Harris's official position is Democrats will continue to fight for LGBTQI+ youth by building on President Biden's historic actions to ban so-called conversion therapy, protecting LGBTQI+ youth, children from bullying and discrimination, guaranteeing that transgender students are treated fairly and with respect at school, and ending the homeless crisis among LGBTQ+ youth. LGBTQ+ Americans have long faced threats to their safety just for being who they are, and President Biden launched the LGBTQI+ Community Safety Partnership to provide community safety trainings, support healthcare providers who serve the LGBTQI+ community, and support LGBTQI+ communities to report hate crimes and build cross-community partnerships to address hate-fueled violence. The DOJ is taking an all-of-department approach to protecting LGBTQI+ rights. Democrats will end violence against transgender Americans, especially Black and brown transgender women, and prioritize the investigation of hate crimes against trans and non-binary peoples. Former President Trump. The left-wing gender insanity being pushed in our children, that is verbatim, is an act of child abuse very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth on day one. I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutilating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures. And pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. And we'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid or Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivingly performed these procedures on minor children. Wow. And then in interview comments, Harris says that transgender people are some of the bravest people in our nation, but nobody should have to be brave just to be themselves. Today, the Biden and Harris administration announced new actions to support the mental health of transgender children, remove barriers that transgender people face, accessing critical government services, and improve the visibility of transgender people in our nation's data. This was an interview with The Advocate last summer. I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law, that is the decision that doctors will make in terms of what is medically necessary. I'm not going to put myself in a position of a doctor, but let's also understand that Donald Trump is running tens of millions of dollars in ads to talk about two cases to distract from the fact that his policy and plan is to take away the Affordable Care Act, which provides health care for tens of millions of people in our country. That's an interview 2 days ago with NBC News. And now we have Trump's recent comments. The transgender thing is incredible. Think of it. Your kid goes to school and comes home a few days later with an operation. The school decides what's going to happen to your child. He said this at a Moms for Liberty rally in August. Cutting federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, or other racial, sexual, or political content onto the lives of our children. It's a statement in Racine, Washington in June. And I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I'll be asking Congress to pass a bill that is establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. These are comments last year. What has the church said? We decry legislative initiatives and government actions targeting trans children and their families. We urge all in the church to create safe spaces and shield all people from harassment based on gender identity. At the 80th General Convention, we called to advocate for all access to gender-affirming care in all forms, be them social, medical, or any other, and at all ages based on our baptismal call to respect the dignity of every human being, and be it further resolved, they should be able to partake in gender-affirming care with no restriction on movement, autonomy, or timing, and understand that protection of religious liberty extends to all Episcopalians who may need or desire to access to utilize to aid others in the procurement of or to offer gender-affirming care. We support public policies at the local, state, and national levels in all our countries to support gender-affirming care.
Thank you so much. So I'm gonna ask, we're gonna kind of move a little quickly. We have a couple more things to talk about. But I want to ask, is there anything surprising so far about the Episcopal Church's stance on gender-affirming care?
It seems much more hardline than the other two were. The other two were like, blah, blah, blah. But this one is like, no, this definitely yes. It seems much more.
I think that's interesting.
Wait, when was this one?
This one was 2023.
Okay.
2024.
Yeah, sorry.
24.
It's 80th.
Which is the most recent General Convention.
Yeah.
Can I also add that it's not up there, but gender identity is not supposed to be a barrier to any level of service and call within the church. And so people can be ordained as deacons, as priests, and theoretically as bishops, even if they are non-gender conforming, transgender, and anywhere on the LGBTQI spectrum.
Is this written by the Episcopal Church in America, or
Yes.
is this for worldwide? Because
The Episcopal Church is-
gender dilemmas are horrendous worldwide.
This is strictly the Episcopal Church, and so the Worldwide Anglican Communion is still fighting about this.
Oh.
And this has gotten the Episcopal Church in some trouble worldwide.
But the Episcopal Church is not just the United States.
That's true. The Episcopal Church is not just the United States. The Episcopal Church exists in
13 other countries.
13 or 14 other countries. Yeah. Haiti, Dominican Republic, Colombia, Taiwan, Cuba, Italy. Like in Europe, we have churches too. There's a whole bunch. Yeah. And we're going to go ahead and move on just for the sake of time.
We're going to just skip on to the Episcopal statement on housing access rather than reading their statements. I'm sure you're familiar with. They have pretty well accessible plans.
Like a one-sentence summary of each of them.
Yeah, Trump's plan is essentially he wants to use our federal BLM lands out west to provide housing to people. He also wants to drive illegal immigrants out of their homes and give those homes to our veterans. Vice President Harris's position is to provide subsidies to and building houses for first-time home buyers. I think that is a fair one-line summary of both plans.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a whole bunch in there. He goes on like a 15-second long rant about flags. She gives a narrative that says very little policy. And our official position is we advocate for a continual strengthening of our social safety net and closing gaps, specifically those surrounding housing. The Church affirms housing as a human right that should be provided to all individuals residing in our community. Additionally, we urge Congress to cap the mortgage interest deduction for wealthy taxpayers and direct the increased revenue to low-income housing assistance programs. This was in 2018. We affirm our commitment to provide rental and owner-occupied housing that is safe, accessible, and affordable for low-income persons and their families, including persons with disabilities. We urge the executive and legislative branches of the federal government and dioceses to adequately fund housing assistance programs and to address the ever-growing gap between affordable units and the number of renters in the bottom quartile of income. This is in 2003, 21 years ago.
So clearly, the Episcopal Church has been talking about housing affordability and defines housing as a human right, which I don't believe either of the candidates have used that terminology to talk about housing. But we definitely are not talking about removing people from their houses so that other people can move into them. Yes.
I'm already I applied for housing like 2025 and I finally got it.
Congratulations.
I'm number one.
Yeah. Congratulations. That is huge. It is so hard to get
Thank
into
you.
affordable housing. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We are rushing through these final things. Anybody want to say anything about housing and the Episcopal Church's stance before we move on to our conclusions?
I just said that it's good economics because I think that like the moderate deduction for high income households is incredibly robust. So and every economy is very robust.
Thank you. I'd like to get an economist's opinion on this.
So I just want to conclude with a statement that Episcopal Public Policy has put out in the last few weeks addressing political violence in our elections. For many, this is all verbatim from the Episcopal Church's Public Policy Office. For many months, security experts have warned that there is a high threat of extremist violence surrounding the 2024 U.S. election. The assassination attempts on former President Trump are exactly the kind of political violence that experts have predicted will occur in response to a variety of factors, including instability, violent rhetoric, and heightened political tension, as well as disinformation exacerbated by artificial intelligence. Council on Foreign Relations research fellow Jacob Ware released a list of warning signs and possible points of election violence, including existential political rhetoric used by political figures, casting doubt over our election results, especially before voting commences, armed paramilitary mobilization, including on social media, spreading of foreign disinformation and interference. Threats you might see leading up to the election include violence at political rallies, meetings, including the RNC and DNC. Thankfully, we didn't see much in that respect this year. And violence at meaningful dates associated with significant political figures. For example, the day that former President Trump was convicted of 34 felonies. And during the election, we might see intimidation or violence against voting centers and election workers, or violent threats towards ballot counters. After the election, we might see attacks on our government buildings or law enforcement. We saw this in our last cycle. Or on constitutional milestones, such as the January 6th anniversary, the counting of the vote, Inauguration Day, etc. So to protect our democracy, election violence and its threat to the U.S. democracy impacts all of us, and we have a responsibility to respond in a way that promotes peace and understanding in times of great tension. As leaders in the Episcopal community, we can prepare by being familiar with the threats of political violence, practicing de-escalation in tense moments, and having a response ready to share with your community if political violence continues. At their core, responses to escalating and tense situations leading up to this year's election need to be guided by peace and truth. By educating ourselves on current issues and warning signs, we can better lead by pushing back against political violence. And I'll close with a quote from our outgoing presiding bishop, Michael Curry. It is a Christian obligation to vote, and more than that is the church's responsibility to help get souls to the polls.
Yep. So thank you so much, Kyle, for this research and for this presentation. I want to say that we are actually, we are a polling place on Election Day.
Okay.
And we also are wanting to make sure that everyone goes out and vote.
Yes.
Vote. Vote. We said at the beginning we are not endorsing any candidate, so go and vote. It is very important that everyone vote. We also are offering a space of prayer on Election Day. So our cathedral will be open all day for prayer. We are a polling place, so we hope that the people who come here to vote will also be able to go and pray so that they can vote faithfully. We are also offering a special prayer service on Tuesday, November 5th at 6 p.m.
Oh, see?
And so if any of you would like to come and you're registered to vote here, you can come and vote here first and then come to our prayer service. It will be about a 30-minute prayer service with then following music and time for meditation and reflection, so that we can reflect on what is happening and how we are feeling and relating to God during this tumultuous election time. And that is open to everyone in the community, 6 p.m. on election night before the polls close. We'll be here to pray.
Well, thanks everyone again. Thank you for your openness. I know that we covered some pretty heavy topics, but though that's the reality of our world right now. As you can see, I think, again, the Episcopal Church will be in a prophetic role, whoever wins the election. We also have to remember that, our salvation does not depend upon the electoral process or electoral system. It's very important to vote. It's very important to use your morals and your ethics to help guide your decision. But ultimately, we will be in a position of trying to make this world a better place inside and outside of that process. We definitely have some work to do. So again, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it, and hope to see you in church in 10 minutes. So come on.
And we thank you for the bacon.
And yes, thank you. On my brother's birthday.